Thought for the day, brothers and sisters. Today I was reading in Psalm 124, 8 verses in that psalm. It's a psalm of David. David was a man of war, and he was reflecting back that if God had not been by his side, what would have happened to him? What would have happened to the people that he was leading? And when I was thinking of God being by our side, I was thinking of 1 Samuel chapter 17. In that story, in that context, we see David being confronted by a giant by the name of Goliath. Goliath was a huge man of the Philistines. The whole army of Israel was afraid of him, petrified to fight him. But David found the key to victory in 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 47. He said, "The battle belongs to the Lord." And shortly after that, he went out and killed this giant. You see, the army of the Israelites was looking at the size of the giant. David was looking at who was by his side. That was God. We are told in Romans chapter 8, verse 31, that if God be for us, who could be against us? Philippians chapter 4, verse 13 tells us that we could do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And John 15, verse 5 says, we are the vine. Christ is the vine, we are only the branches. Apart from him, we can't do nothing. So when we look at our lives and the fears in our lives, the problem we have is that sometimes we make the giants so big in our lives, whether it's fear, anxiety, anger, bitterness, and we minimize God. Another way we find victory in our lives over the giants that we might face is by having good company. In Exodus chapter 17, there was a battle going on between the Israelites and the people called Amalekites. And we're told in verse 11 of Exodus chapter 17 that when Moses' hands were lifted up towards heaven, the Israelites would win. But if his hands dropped down, then the enemies would win. Fortunately, he had two men by his side, one Aaron, one so they would help him keep his hands up. And when I was reading that, I was thinking about how important it is to have good people around us. This is another way we find victory in our lives over the emotions and the past hurts that we've had when we have good people around us. The book of Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 14, chapter 15, verse 22, and chapter 24, verse 6, all speak about good counsel, good wisdom, having good people around us to build us up. The opposite of that is having bad counsel, having bad company. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33 tells us that bad company corrupts good morals. So the company you keep is very important when you're going through the struggles in your life. You want to surround yourself with godly people. If you surround yourself with worldly people and their opinions when you're struggling, I found out in my life that these people weren't really your friends. They had ulterior motives as to why they hung around you, selfish motives. But when you were hanging around people that are godly, they truly have what's best for you in their heart to help you. So when we look at the giants in our lives and the battles we have, brothers and sisters, let us remember that when God is with us through Jesus Christ, there's nothing we can't do. That doesn't mean we're perfect. Oftentimes, God works mightiest when we're weakest. He is strongest when we are weak. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 to 10, we read of the account of the Apostle Paul being brought up to the third heaven. He saw things that nobody else would see. No other human being would see except for Christ himself. But what was he given? He wasn't given a crown. He was given a thorn. And there's an old saying, before the crown in our life, there's often the cross. And that's what Jesus Christ had to go through. We read that in Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, that he endured the cross because he saw the glory that was set before him. And that's how it is with us in life, brothers and sisters. A lot of times, as 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9 says, God's grace is sufficient, for his power is made perfect in our weakness. The thorn that Paul was given, he asked 3 times for Christ to remove. And Jesus said, no, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Sometimes we have to get weak. Sometimes we have to be put on our back, so to speak, so that the only place we can look is up. Too often when we are healthy, everything's going well, like I'm walking in this wooded area, you're looking straight ahead. You're looking at your destiny, what's in front of you. But sometimes when we're laid up on our back, we have to look up to God for our help. So a lot of times we struggle in life so that God's power can be seen most mightiest in our lives. So I hope today's devotional video, brothers and sisters, will help us all to remember, as King David remembered, that if God had not been by his side through all the wars he had to go through as the commander-in-chief of Israel, he would have failed. He acknowledged this. And as I said before, with the story of David with Goliath, the army, the people were looking at the size of the giant. David didn't worry about the size of the giant. He knew that the giant that was in him, who was God, is mightier than that big man that was in front of him. When you minimize God in your life, you maximize your problems. I've always been a fight-or-flight person. I struggle with it all my life. And I'm not here to stand and tell you I am perfect. I still struggle. My flesh. That's why in Romans chapter 6, especially in verses 6 and 11, it speaks about crucifying the old man. I have to put to death the old person that was within me daily, every day. 1 Corinthians 15 verse 31 tells us, Paul said, we die daily. We die to ourselves every day until we go home to be with the Lord in glory. Let us remember that as Galatians chapter 2 verses 16 and 20 tells us, the life we live now is in Christ, not me, not us. And when we do that, yes, struggles are going to come, trials are going to come. Me and my wife a few months ago recently, and my kids had the coronavirus. At first I was like, oh my, what's going to be? Then, by the grace of God, as Psalm 46 verse 10 says, be still and know that I am God. When you look at the Lord through your storms, he helps you. You remember the story of Peter when he was on the sea and he said to Jesus, could I come to you, when Christ was walking on the water? Jesus said, come. And Peter was walking, but when he started to look at the waves and the water, that's when he started to sink. He took his eyes off of Christ and started to look at his outward circumstances. And that's how it is with us, brothers and sisters. When we look at our outward circumstances and take our eyes off of Christ, we start to sink. But when we cry out to him, oh, how faithful and true Christ is, to pick up our hand out of the water and rise us up again. God bless you all this day, my brothers and sisters. Stay strong in the Lord. And remember, if Christ be with you, who can be against you? Take care this day, and God bless you.